Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Talking Real Estate with Champions Real Estate Team here at Berkshire Hathaway Home Services Ambassador Real Estate Company. My name is Mark Wehner II, team leader at Champions Real Estate Team. So every Wednesday, as you know, if you've seen us before, we jump on here and kind of give a rundown what's gone on in the real estate market over the last week and kind of give you what our thoughts are on it and moving forward and what we're kind of seeing and what talking to other agents and just being in the marketplace of what's going on in the mortgage world, in the real estate world, investment world, all that kind of fun stuff. So we try to keep you up to date every Wednesday. So we'll jump straight into the graphics we use, just kind of keep it similar so everyone knows what's going on. And what am I screening it all? All right. Anyways, so how about the graphic here? So as far as what's gone on in the last 7 days, we've had 351 new listings over the last 7 days. That is down about 100 from the week prior to. So as we're kind of coming in, obviously next week we got Thanksgiving and things like that. I think it kind of slows down as people are like, well, let's maybe wait till after the holidays, you know, in that regard. So it's just depending on when people need to move and all that good stuff. So new contracts written, 255. So there are contracts that are in the pending status. That's similar to what we've seen in the last couple of weeks, right around that 250 mark, give or take. So as we can see, there's less homes that came on the market this week, but the similar amount of buyers are out there. And then sold homes are at about just under 350 for those happy new homeowners with regards to that. So let's jump into the 30,000-foot view of the big picture of the Omaha and Lincoln MLS. So as we see here, as this quickly pulls up for you guys on the screen, we have just 2626 as far as the number of active homes for your viewing pleasure in the Omaha and Lincoln MLS. So that's a combined Lincoln and Omaha. So just narrowing it down a little further to Douglas and Sarpy County, we got 1,517 houses. And then existing homes, just under 600, new construction, 920. So those are similar as we've seen the previous weeks. Our months of inventory has obviously risen by about 2 months from our the first part of the year, where we were almost just below 1 month supply of inventory. So, which is typical for this time of year, seasonal, when the weather starts getting cold. Obviously, if we've seen, this last week or so, the big cold front coming through, obviously we had some snow locally around here. So our inventory is up, which I think we're more of a healthy market. Going back to a normal market, not as crazy as we're going through there, but average sold price hasn't changed much from the last couple of weeks, about that 317 mark. But as we're looking here, those have been actively in the market right now. And I know last week right before we talked, so for those of you who are looking in the market right now, you gained 10% purchasing power from this time last week. So we were at 7.5% just a couple weeks ago, and now we're down to about 6.5%, give or take on the day. That thing fluctuates fairly regularly as far as interest rates, but that 1% drop gains you 10% in purchasing power. So if you're looking at a $200,000 house, now you can look at a $220,000 house with regards to your purchasing power with your PMI and your payment in that regards. I know we've talked many times before on this video, not really a podcast, but just kind of our informational. I did see a graphic the other day as I pull it up here, and we kind of talked about this beforehand of 6 months ago when people are paying $50,000 more, potentially for houses. This graphic kind of gives the numbers aren't exactly accurate, but it gives a good picture of what we're talking about, and not listening to the talking heads of interest rates are so high, it's a bad time to buy, prices are inflated in regards to that. But as you can see, about 6 months ago, a $450,000 house, was potentially selling for $500, depending on the condition. And there's obviously a bunch of different variables, but if you're putting 10% down, 4.5% interest rate, the payment is very similar to what we're seeing today, that 450 house may be selling for potentially 425, maybe a little bit higher than that, depending on where you're at and the condition and all that, the variables that go into that. But at a 6.5% interest rate is very similar. So taking a look at and breaking it down by the numbers, there's not much difference from what was 6 months ago to what is today, even though we're 2% higher interest rate now, and you lose 20% of your purchasing power, you're still able to get that same payment. So that's why we're saying, and we've said it multiple times over the last couple of months as interest rates have started to go up, is that, date the rate and marry the house. That if you can get into that house at 425, and you got to, say a $3,050 payment at 6.5, let's say in a year or 2 years, depending on what rates are doing, if you get that down to a 4.5 payment, you're going to be saving, a lot on your payment there and gaining some equity in it as well, rather than at a $500 purchase price, 10% down, 50%, it's just the numbers make more sense in regards to that. So those are those things that we talk about, we've talked over previous weeks, is getting to, with someone here at Champions Real Estate Team and Russ Williams at Williams Mortgage, and just know the numbers of what's going on. What does that 6.5% interest rate mean to you as a payment? The 10% down, 20% down, where does it fit? Does it fit in your budget? Yes, no, maybe. And then just have the data so you can make an educated decision, rather than, everyone, probably going to Thanksgiving dinners, next week, and everyone's going to be talking, potentially, if you're talking about moving, or your family size is growing, or you're downsizing, because that's what we're seeing. A lot of people that are doing the moving right now with higher interest rates are typically those ones that are having major life events. You're changing jobs, you're getting, married, divorced, kids, empty nesting. And those are a lot of times what we see people moving. And if you're talking about that, you may be listening to the family members, friends at the dinners, or, when you're going out to them, they're like, oh my gosh, the housing market this and the housing market that. Well, it's just like being an armchair quarterback, sitting on a Sunday going, what's going on? Talk to an expert, either Russ or myself or someone on a Champions Real Estate Team here would love to sit down and just give you the numbers that you need to know, and you can be educated when your family members may say that and say, hey, give Mark a holler. He'll kind of give you, so it's everyone wants to be the smartest person in the room sometimes, but are they really in what they've done? When was the last time they bought a house or sold a house in that marketplace? So that's what we're here for, is to help you get a better understanding with what's going on. So with regards to that, I guess we'll kind of jump in with Russ and kind of get his take on what he's seeing in the mortgage rate. And we just kind of touched on that they dropped in the last week. Russ is usually the numbers guy that knows exactly why things happen. And that's why I trust him with a lot of my clients to work with them so that they understand what's going on. So I guess, Russ, we did see that almost 1% drop in the last, week or so. Why did it happen? What can we see down the road? Obviously, elections probably played a point into it and all that good stuff. So,
yeah, bottom line, Mark, uncertainty usually drives pessimism. And so we've talked about this for, months, Mark, that inflation has been a worry and it's been a fear. And the Fed, of course, has been engaged in trying to bring inflation down. And those inflation numbers are reported each month in several reports. Last week gave us what they call the Consumer Price Index, or CPI report. That's a measure of inflation at the retail level. And also what's called the Producer Price Index, or PPI, and that's a measure of inflation at the wholesale level, so the manufacturing level, so to speak. So both of those numbers, as we've talked about, Mark, on here for a long time, came in better than the market anticipated. The Fed has been basically saying they want to keep the foot on the gas of rate hikes to try to get inflation under control. They're late to the dance. We've talked about that for a long, long time. And they're continuing to say they want to do that, but we are starting to see the impact of rate hikes, so short-term rate hikes. Inflation numbers are starting to look a little bit better. The inflation numbers reported last week, the PPI and the CPI report, are backward looking, meaning they're looking at the last 12 months, and they add those monthly numbers together to come up with the annualized rate. Now, we all know that as the Fed is tightening the screws on interest rates and making it more expensive for people to borrow money, people are generally going to spend less, and that's a deflationary pressure. So just by raising rates, that puts a damper on demand, and we knew eventually that it would start to bring inflation numbers down, and we started to see that happen just this last week. The market responded, and again, going back to the point of uncertainty, there is the appearance now that we are going to see inflation continue to improve over the next several months. If that's true, we'll start to see more interest in investors putting money back into the bond market, which will eventually help bring mortgage rates even further down. Obviously, we can have the apple cart upset if we end up going into a world war or other types of uncertainty. Those are things, or inflation were to pop back up. Those are things that could push mortgage rates higher. But absent something geopolitical, the pressure that the Fed is putting on inflation is starting to pay dividends. And that's starting to bring mortgage rates down because inflation is looking better and investors are more willing to jump on board and buy these mortgage bonds. So do we think rates could go down further? Yeah, we do. How quickly is kind of hard to say. It really depends upon how the economy absorbs these rate hikes. One thing we'll be watching very closely is, and historically, when the Fed has been slow to the dance like this, they've overreacted and ultimately started to push unemployment numbers higher. And we're already seeing leading indicators, companies laying off. What was it? Facebook, Mark, is laying off like 11,000 people. Lots of other companies are laying off. Other companies are putting hiring freezes on. Those are all things that could push unemployment rates a little bit higher. And ultimately, that is a pressure against inflation as well. So, and that likely could push us into recession. I think probably highly likely could push us into recession sometime in the next few months. So mortgage rates are better than they were last week. And as you talked about, you mentioned earlier, you're exactly right. A 1% drop in mortgage rates, as we've seen over the last week, is going to affect your borrowing power by about 10%. Do I expect we'll see rates drop 1% over the next week? Absolutely not. I expect we'll probably be in this range for a little while. The Fed's actions are telling the markets that it is starting to work. And so the markets have responded, but we're not going to see a 1% drop every week for the next several weeks. We'll probably be in this range for the foreseeable future until we have really better inflationary news, deflationary news, and then we might see rates improve better. But think about this, Mark. A lot of those folks that have stepped to the sidelines because they didn't want to pay these higher interest rates are now looking at maybe jumping back in. You're not the only one jumping back into the market. A lot of other people are on the sidelines as well, which means with inventory levels still being low, like you showed us a moment ago, Mark, the more people we have coming back into the home buying market, the harder it is going to be for you to win that bid. So jump in now while you have the best mix, if you will, of price relative to interest rate. Prices, if we have a lot of buyers jump back in, could continue to push higher, especially in lower price points. And as interest rates drop further, we're going to have more people jumping back into the market, Mark.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you have, and if time's on your side and you can look now and find something that trips your trigger and it makes sense, then pull the trigger. It's going to be a good time, still a great time to buy. And you're going to, don't go out there when there's 5-10 people. There was houses last summer and spring that there's 20 agents in the house. I mean, it was crazy. You're waiting outside, and if you can avoid that aspect of it and get a decent rate right now that isn't, north of 7%, and you can save yourself, 10% of that, from that drop that we've just seen. And like you said, I don't think it's going to drop crazy, here in the near future, but get in there where it is, because if you got 10 more people jump in the market, that just is potentially, if they're all looking at the same house, is going to drive that price up a little bit. But still, it's the best time to do it, honestly, in my opinion. But it's just everybody's situation is different. And like I said at the beginning of this, we'd love to sit down with you one-on-one and explain, what we see in the market. Does it make sense for you? And maybe it doesn't. Then let's wait till next spring. Maybe you need to, get a little more in the savings account or for your down payment and things of that sort. But think about it this way: for every $1,000 you either put down on a house, don't put down on a house, or goes up or down in purchase price on that contract price, it affects your monthly payment by about $5. So if your goal is to save an extra, I want to put an extra $10,000 down on a house, and that's where I feel comfortable. Well, maybe that makes sense. And you think $10,000 is a lot of money, but from a monthly payment perspective, it's only $50 a month. And with the cost of things rising right now, that's a tank of gas for most people. So if you can save a tank of gas instead of paying $10,000, maybe you keep that money aside and, for an emergency fund. And if you can get into that house and that $50 a month isn't going to necessarily break the bank on you, then maybe it makes sense to, to pull the trigger. We had that personally when we were looking to build our house in, 2018, that, the cost of new construction was going up 25-30% every year. We're not going to save enough to offset that increase. And let's pull the trigger now before it gets crazy, which luckily we did. We built before where it's at. And so, but that's just something so you have that information so that you can make an educated decision. And if it makes sense, let's go find a house. If not, let's get a plan to potentially get you into a house with regards to that. So I don't know if Russ, you have anything else to add on that, or you're on mute.
I know we're headed into the holiday season, and there's a perception among many that homes don't sell during the winter, and that's absolutely not true. Some of my busiest times have been in the winter, so it's a great time for you to find a house, and we're happy to help.
Yeah, absolutely. So love to help you. If you have any questions, give us a holler. Reach out to us on any of our social media platforms. Obviously, our numbers are right here on the right there on the bottom: 672-7670 or 290-8936. Love to chat with you, set up a Zoom call, meet in person, all that good stuff. So, but we're just here to help and coach and educate you and get you the scouting report on what the other team's doing from that perspective. So appreciate everyone listening. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, give us a holler and we will